Hello and welcome. I'm Amy.
And I'm Tom.
Today we're taking a close look at some sources you've shared with us. They're about that Trump-Putin summit in Anchorage, Alaska.
Right.
And our plan is really to unpack what it might mean geopolitically for Europe and specifically Poland, see if we can pull out some surprising insights.
Yeah, and what's really striking, I think, is how these sources frame it. They're calling it a pivotal moment.
Pivotal.
Showing these deep shifts in global power. And, a summit basically happening over the heads of European leaders. That seems to be raising some serious alarm bells in this material.
Okay, that's a strong frame.
Yeah.
So how do these sources interpret the motivations behind it all?
Well, there seem to be two main ways they look at it. Some suggest Trump was basically trying to maintain the U.S. empire, seeing Ukraine and Poland as these key rimland areas, those strategic coastal zones.
Right, controlling access.
Exactly. But others think it was much simpler, solely about protecting the dollar's dominance financially, which, either way, raises this big question for Europe. What does it actually mean when these major powers negotiate your security, but you're not in a room?
Yeah, that's a huge point. And connecting that maybe to the bigger picture, the sources mention Putin's perspective too.
They do. They highlight his view that this whole conflict, it's fundamentally about what he sees as the U.S.'s unjustified global position.
Unjustified? How so?
Well, they use some pretty strong language, describing the U.S. almost like a business project.
A business project?
Yeah, or even like a narcotics addict, just printing money. And that this allows it to sort of imperially suffocate Europe's own agency.
Wow, suffocate. That's potent.
It is, limiting its choices, basically. And what's really interesting is the claim that this approach, it isn't even fully backed by, actual U.S. material strength anymore.
So what are the consequences then, according to these sources, for Europe?
They're painted as potentially profound. I mean, there's this stark warning. This summit could be Europe's greatest defeat since the fall of Constantinople.
That's quite a statement, a massive historical parallel.
It implies a huge loss of influence, of sovereignty. So to counter this, the sources propose some really radical solutions.
Okay, like what?
Things like Europe stopping buying U.S. military gear, full stop.
Really?
And instead, building its own advanced systems. We're talking command and control C2 system.
The nerve centers.
Exactly. Plus drones, AI, the works. And it goes further. Challenging the dollar's dominance, maybe even. Exploring nuclear proliferation for genuine security.
Whoa, okay. Nuclear proliferation.
Yeah.
That is extremely radical. Do the sources, do they grapple with the risks, the feasibility of something like that? It's a massive leap.
They definitely acknowledge the scale of it. It's framed more as this kind of existential choice,
Right.
The emphasis is all on Europe grabbing back its own agency, building real strategic autonomy.
Okay, so boiling this down, what does it mean for Poland in particular? You mentioned Poland earlier.
Yeah, so for Poland, the sources suggest the elites there might be a bit stuck in old ways of thinking.
Stuck how?
In relying perhaps too much on existing frameworks. Instead, they propose this third way.
The third way.
Forging a kind of north-south axis. Think Scandinavia, Poland, Ukraine, perhaps.
Interesting geographical alignment.
And it's not just alliances. It's about developing asymmetric capabilities. Things like being able to quarantine or blockade Kaliningrad.
Blockade Kaliningrad, that's specific and provocative.
Highly. It's about finding ways to counter a stronger adversary by hitting vulnerabilities, building independent strength, basically, and countering what one source calls a vassal instinct.
A vassal instinct. Ouch. So a tendency to rely on others rather than forging their own path.
That seems to be the implication, yes. A perceived need to break away from dependency.
Okay. So that brings us to a final, maybe quite chilling thought from these sources.
There is one. It's this question. What if Europe doesn't take these radical steps? What if it submits?
Right.
And then the U.S. finds itself confronting a China that won't yield. Does that increase the chances, the probability of a hot global conflict?
And what do the sources suggest?
They suggest it does. So they argue the U.S., maybe isn't acting as a force for good anymore, that it's broken previous rules of the game.
Pushing us towards something new and dangerous?
Potentially, yes. Yeah. A dangerous new era where global power dynamics are just completely reshaped. It definitely gives you something to think about, doesn't it?
It certainly does. We've covered some really provocative ground based on your sources today. The implications are, quite significant. Thank you all for tuning in.
And you can subscribe to our podcast if you like it.
See you next time.